There is a locomotive engineer somewhere in Ohio right now who has been running trains for 31 years without a single serious incident on his record, and in about 45 minutes, he is going to pass a signal that he swears was showing clear when he approached it. And by this time next week, his career will be over, and nobody at the railroad will care that he spent 3 decades learning every curve and grade and trouble spot on his territory, or that he trained half the engineers who still work there today, or that he has never once put a train on the ground in 31 years of service, because none of that matters when the policy says terminate, and the policy does not have a column for years of experience. The railroad will hold what the workers have called a kangaroo court for as long as anyone can remember, which is their name for the disciplinary hearings where the outcome is decided before anyone walks through the door, and they will find him guilty because they find almost everyone guilty, and they will terminate him on the spot because that is what the policy says happens when you pass a signal that the railroad claims you should have stopped at regardless of what you say you saw when you approached it, or what the conductor sitting 3 feet away says he saw, or what your 3 decades of spotless service might suggest about the kind of engineer you actually are and the kind of attention you actually pay to the signals you are approaching. This is how it works now at most of the major railroads in America, and the workers have a saying about it that has been passed around the bunk rooms and the crew vans and the hotel lobbies and the union halls for as long as anyone can remember, which goes like this. It is the only place in the world where they try to fire you from the day they hire you. Whether you have been on the property for 30 days or 30 years, the railroads use discipline as a weapon of control rather than a tool for safety, and they apply their policies without any consideration for the human being on the other end of the termination letter, or the institutional knowledge that is about to walk out the door and never come back. Norfolk Southern has what they call a one-and-done policy for passing a red signal, which means exactly what it sounds like it means, and Canadian Pacific has the same policy now after years of allowing up to 3 violations before termination, and the other Class 1 railroads have their own versions of essentially the same idea, which is that 30 years of experience and safe operation count for absolutely nothing when the railroad decides they want you gone, and they have a policy that gives them the excuse to do it. The Federal Railroad Administration has its own schedule of penalties for what they call decertification, where the first offense gets you 30 days off and the second offense gets you a year off, and the third offense gets you 5 years off. But here is the part that most people outside the industry do not understand. The railroad can pile their own discipline on top of whatever the FRA hands down, and their discipline can include permanent termination regardless of where you are in the federal schedule, and regardless of how many years of safe service you have behind you. So a man can have one incident in 30 years and find himself not just decertified for 30 days under federal rules, but permanently dismissed from the company he gave his entire working life to, because the railroad's policy says they can do that, and so they do. The grievance process exists on paper, and the union will absolutely fight for you. And eventually your case might make its way to arbitration, where you might even win and get your job back. But that process takes years to work its way through the system, and the railroads know exactly how long it takes, and they use that delay as a weapon against their own employees. If you are off the property while your case winds through committee hearings and arbitration panels, you are not getting a paycheck from the railroad. And if you happen to be injured in whatever incident led to your termination, then you are also dealing with mounting medical bills, and you cannot collect anything from the railroad until your injury claims settle separately, and the railroad can dangle your job in front of you like a piece of meat and offer to make everything go away. If you just sign this paper and accept this settlement that is worth about 1/10 of what your claim is actually worth, because they know you are desperate and they know you have a mortgage and a family that depends on you. The workers have another phrase for this particular form of torture, and it goes hurt, broke, and fired, which describes exactly the position the railroad puts you in when they want to squeeze you into accepting whatever lowball offer they decide to put on the table. Because you cannot afford to wait 2 years for an arbitration hearing that might or might not go your way and might or might not result in any back pay, even if you do eventually win and get reinstated to a job that you should never have lost in the first place. The railroad knows that a man with 30 years of service has 30 years worth of financial obligations and 30 years worth of life built around the assumption that he would keep working until his pension vested completely, and they use every single one of those obligations as leverage against him when they want him to sign a paper that makes his claims go away for a fraction of what they are worth. What makes all of this even more damaging to the industry and to the safety of the people who ride along railroad tracks in their cars and their trucks every single day is what walks out the door every time a veteran engineer gets terminated over a single incident after decades of safe service. The Federal Railroad Administration commissioned a research report recently about the critical knowledge loss happening across the industry as experienced workers leave through retirement or termination, or simply giving up and walking away. And what the researchers found was that the railroads are facing a situation where decades of expertise about how to actually run trains safely and efficiently simply disappears when these men and women are gone, and there is nobody left who remembers what they knew. The researchers talked about something called tacit knowledge, which is all the accumulated wisdom that lives in a veteran engineer's head that never gets written down in any manual or training document anywhere, because nobody has ever figured out how to capture it. Things like knowing exactly which sound a bearing makes in the crucial moments before it fails catastrophically, or understanding which dispatchers tend to give you information that turns out to be wrong, or remembering that one particular stretch of track where the signal timing gets strange when it rains heavily, and you need to adjust your approach accordingly. Studies have shown that only about 20% of what experienced workers actually know exists in any kind of formal documentation that could be passed on to new employees, which means a full 80% of the knowledge that keeps trains running safely lives only in the heads of people like that engineer in Ohio, who is about to lose his job over one incident after 31 years of building up exactly the kind of expertise that cannot be replaced by hiring someone new off the street. The industry has already gutted itself of tens of thousands of experienced workers through layoffs and furloughs, and the kind of brutal working conditions that drove thousands of people to simply quit and walk away, even during a time when walking away meant losing their pensions and their health coverage and their seniority and everything else they had built up over careers that lasted decades. Train and engine personnel numbers have dropped by more than 12,000 workers since 2017 alone, and the railroads are consistently ranked among the worst places to work in America by the people who actually work there and know what it is like. And now, they are struggling to recruit new employees in a competitive job market, while simultaneously throwing away the veterans who could have trained the next generation if anyone had bothered to ask them to stick around and share what they know. There is an engineer somewhere in Ohio right now who does not yet know that his career is about to end over something that will take a hearing officer about 15 minutes to decide after 31 years of safe and dedicated service, and somewhere in a filing cabinet in a railroad office building, there is a personnel file that documents 3 decades of doing the job exactly the way it should be done that will mean absolutely nothing once the railroad decides to apply a policy that makes no distinction whatsoever between a man on his first day and a man on his last.